Good evening from Washington. I'm Leland Vittert. Rarely does America speak with one voice, but last night they did. From Seattle to New York, Virginia to Minneapolis, voters revolted against a progressive elite worldview and dealt Democrats a devastating rebuke. Start across the Potomac River. President Biden won the Commonwealth of Virginia by 10 points this January. A Republican will move into the governor's mansion. Republican businessman Glenn Youngkin ran on a MAGA without the crazy agenda, capturing the anger of suburban parents against critical race theory, mask mandates, school shutdowns, and teacher unions to flip counties Mr. Biden won last year. Youngkin embraced a religious conservative and patriotic tone in southwestern Virginia to win Trump counties by some even larger margins. Here is the result, as illustrated by the New York Times: a red wave in every county of Virginia, the wealthy D.C. suburbs, the rural Southwest, and the military bases of Hampton Roads. The New Jersey governor's race took 24 hours to find a victor, and Democrat Phil Murphy won by the narrowest of margins. That was called just a couple of minutes ago. Ordinarily, that wouldn't be news, except New Jersey is a state nobody thought would even remotely be competitive. President Biden carried it by more than 16 points, a stunning slide to the right. In Minneapolis, ground zero for defund the police last year, voters overwhelmingly rejected a ballot initiative to replace the police department with a division for public safety. You can see the tally right there. In Seattle, Republican Ann Davidson, yes, a Republican won in Seattle against a Democrat who wanted to abolish the police department. For perspective, President Biden got 75% of the vote in Seattle last year. Ann Donnelly won the other side of the country, also a Republican, in Nassau County on Long Island. She won by 20 points, running against a proposal to end bail for misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. The New York Times summarized the entire country's red wave this way: rough night for Democrats exposes the party's weaknesses less than a year after taking power in Washington. The party faces a grim immediate future, struggling to energize voters without a presidential foil and losing messaging wars to Republicans. Back to Virginia, because it provides the best case study. Terry McAuliffe had a pretty clear message. In the days of Republicans bowing to the altar of Trump, begging for his attention, adulation, and endorsement might be over as well. Glenn Youngkin refused to mention Trump's name on the stump. Even when directly asked, he refused to say the T word and treated the former president almost like a crazy uncle, not invited to Thanksgiving. My friend Mike Allen, founder of Axios, created a branding for Youngkin amid those ready to try the playbook for 2022. There it is, Trump Light. And Mike joins us now. Good to see you, my friend, as always. Thank you.
Pretty nice real estate. Thanks for having me up.
Yeah, it's not a bad view for good conversation here. Connect for us the leads of your newsletter yesterday, Trump Light, and today, Dems Devastated.
Yeah, so you have the big picture, which was a wave of skepticism and pessimism. You had people who have really decided that Joe Biden has not delivered what they hoped, and that's linked with like a big worry about the direction of the country. Like in a 50-50 country, Leland, we rarely see a poll like this. 70% of people, 70% of independents, no less, saying the country's headed in the wrong direction. If you're Terry McAuliffe, you look like the establishment, you've held the office before, that's a problem. So that was the wave. Glenn Youngkin surfed it. He's 6'7", a basketball player, but surfed it with this Trump Light strategy. And it was exactly what you said. That was an incredible clip of you interviewing him. You asked him about Trump, and what did he talk about? James Madison.
That was
right?
a great pivot. He just said, I don't know, and moved on to James Madison. You talked about President Biden, though, and Terry McAuliffe wrapped himself in President Biden. President Biden wrapped himself in Terry McAuliffe. And then when questioned today, here is how President Biden talked about his responsibility in the loss in Virginia. Take a listen.
Do you take some responsibility, and do you think that Terry McAuliffe would have won if your agenda had passed before Election Day?
Well, I think we should have passed before Election Day, but I'm not sure that I would be able to have changed the number of very conservative folks who turned out in the red districts who were Trump voters.
President Biden's basically explained this loss. If only Democrats on Capitol Hill, where they control the House and Senate, had done more, McAuliffe would have won. Does the White House really believe that, or are they trying to energize Democrats to do something before the 2022 midterms?
Yeah, well, no, they're going to try and get him to do something this week. So they're going to try to use this moment to prod Democrats to go ahead and pass the infrastructure bill and then eventually the larger bill. Axios' Hans Nichols reporting the White House strategy is to speed up, not slow down, and to try to get them to move quickly. And there's a reason for that, Leland. As you know, if you're a Democrat who was in one of these districts across the country that's suburban, that's a swing district, you're looking at that map and you're worried. A different way to say what you said about every county going intensively for Youngkin is Youngkin, Axios is reporting, outperformed Donald Trump in every single county in Virginia. The flip side of that. And so that means that he got more people and he got them to head his way. And so, like, a very powerful issue. You know, I've covered politics for a long time. Education, that's an issue that you put in Democrats' bucket, right?
But it's never a number one issue. You've covered, you started
big, but when it was, you think of it as a blue issue, right?
Yeah.
And that was a very successful jiu-jitsu by Glenn Youngkin. This is what we talked about the other night when we said that there was a moment that it changed. And the moment was
the debate.
When Terry McAuliffe said that parents shouldn't be involved in schools. Leland, I can tell you when I knew the outcome of last night's election, and that is 5:25 p.m., before the polls even closed, because there was a tweet of NBC's exit poll. And like as you did on your air, you never talk about where things are headed, but you talk about the demographics of who turned out.
Right.
And when I saw that 80+% of people who turned out said that parents should have some or much control over the curriculum, you look at that electorate, that is a Youngkin electorate.
It is a Youngkin electorate. I want to just get one more soundbite in with you. This is Senator Mark Warner reacting to the election. Took a little bit of different tack than Joe Biden. Take a listen.
In terms of concerns about education at the local level, he touched a nerve. And I think those of us on the Democratic side need to sit back and think about how we address that.
All right, Warner taking a little different tack, saying, clearly Youngkin is on to something. We need to address that. Is that a moment of honesty and a break with the party? If so, why?
Pure practicality, right? Like Mark Warner's a pal. Like I covered him back when he ran for senator against John Warner, a Warner versus Warner race before eventually becoming governor. And so he knows the state and he sees the power of this issue. So I know you've been having similar conversations today. Democrats are saying, what do we need to change? Because another one of President Obama's former aides said that if you had the Senate and House elections today, Democrats would lose both.
Yeah, and that's what they're truly terrified. Mike Allen of Axios, good friend as always to come out in the cold. Thank you, my friend. Great to see you.
Thank you for the great coverage.
Yeah, it was awesome. Good to see you, my friend. Democrats, as they tried to make their closing arguments yesterday and the previous weeks, quadrupled down on an anti-MAGA agenda. They did it for the past year, pushing fairly radical policies on climate, wokeism, the border, taxes, government intervention, and defund the police. President Obama faced a similar rebuke to last night in both 2009 and then in 2010 during the midterms. One Democrat rang the alarm bell that this would be deja vu all over again. He is former mayor of Miami Beach, Philip Levine, who joins us now. Mayor, are you vindicated that your prognostications have come true with this?
Unfortunately, Leland, there's no question about it. It's a little bit, when you live in Miami, you live in Florida, you get to understand when hurricanes are coming. We see them 5, 6, 7 days, 10 days out. This was a major storm that we saw on the radar that was going to hit. I mean, literally, this is no shock to anybody. And as I said before, for example, in Virginia, the loss itself was not necessarily caused by the candidate, but it was caused by the progressive left of the party, Bernie Sanders and AOC. They caused this loss.
It's interesting. You would think that Democrats, and especially the pundit class, would take a minute and step back and say, wait a second, how do you have Glenn Youngkin run up the tally, as Mike pointed out, both in Trump counties and then also run it up and switch over suburban white women swing voters who voted for Biden. It was an incredible tightrope that he walked and what he pulled off. You heard the reporting from Mike, and our own reporting matches up. We'll have Kelly Meyer a little later. Democrats are saying, no, we must pass all those bills this week. It's imperative to do it. They're using this loss not to take stock and reevaluate, but as an excuse to push ahead even faster. What would be the prediction for what that means?
Well, I would think if I'm Senator Manchin right now, and after watching what happened last night in New Jersey and Virginia, and no matter what the New Jersey outcome is, I would be very concerned about passing any type of massive overspending bill like this and thinking about my own possible political future in West Virginia. It's got to make people think twice. Clearly, Virginia spoke and New Jersey spoke. And I think a lot of it has to do with that level of spending.
The other places that spoke were the cities. We saw defund the police candidates get voted out. We saw law and order candidates get voted in, even in deep blue cities. We saw in Miami Beach something that you've pushed forward very strongly, which is a 2 a.m. alcohol limit for sales there. Where is this groundswell of support among Democrats coming on Republican issues?
Well, I think it's very clear. The ridiculousness of defund the police is something that we'll look back and maybe even now and laugh at how ridiculous that is. No society can prosper or have any success unless they have total safety in their community. In Miami Beach, we've seen things go out of control. We've seen a ridiculous late night liquor till 5 a.m. with chaos going on. And our mayor and we took the steps of pushing and saying we're going to cut the liquor off earlier. But listen, even look at Eric Adams in New York City, a 20-year police officer, as a captain of the police force. He ran on law and order. The Democrats have to get back to the basics, get back to what we know is important in creating a safe environment. And if you can't do that, you cannot be elected. Democrats are learning that right now.
Well, the lesson is being taught. Whether or not they're learning it is something different, especially on what you're hearing from Capitol Hill. It's a little different than some of your thoughts. Mayor, good to see you. Appreciate you making time before the dinner party, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Does Glenn Youngkin's win reshape the MAGA movement? Ahead, what voters in Virginia's Trump country told me about the governor's race.
Kind of rising off the momentum of Trump, I think people are sick of career politicians, and I think that's something that Glenn Youngkin resonates with voters as he comes across as I'm not a politician.
Glenn Youngkin hasn't wrapped himself in the MAGA flag. Does that bother anybody?
No, not really.
But this is Trump country for sure.
Oh, yeah.
We need a leader in this state, not a follower. And if that man can stand up like the leader of our president of the United States can do, we don't want him following. We want him leading.
And you think Youngkin can lead in his own way?
I think so, yes.
Now he is the governor-elect and will be forced to lead in his own way. That was our mini focus group with voters in Washington County, Virginia. That's right on the Virginia-Tennessee line, shortly before the governor's election. And now it appears that Glenn Youngkin actually did better in Trump counties than the former president himself. Incredible to think about. While there were less people voting in 2020, more people voting in 2020 than today, Youngkin beat Trump's margins in MAGA strongholds like Washington County, where he got 79% of the vote versus Trump's 75.6%. Hanover County, Youngkin got 68% versus the president's 62%. Youngkin also flipped 4 counties that went for President Biden in 2020, including Virginia Beach and Chesapeake County, where he also outperformed Biden's margins with voters there. To help explain this, we bring in Vince Colonnese, editorial director of the Daily Caller, radio host here in Washington. All right, it makes sense that you have a candidate who changes the playbook and does better either in MAGA country or with suburban voters that we've talked about. How does Youngkin do better with both? And then how do you replicate that for Republicans in 2022?
Well, I think what he did was he basically took Trump voters, convinced them that he's going to speak to their issues, and then he grew from there. And the reality is, look, he was dealt a historically bad opponent. I mean, this was Texas Hold'em, Terry McAuliffe was holding a 2-7 offsuit. I mean, it was just the worst campaign you could possibly think of, especially that September 29th gaffe where Terry McAuliffe says out loud that parents shouldn't be in the business of telling schools what their kids should learn. So that's the hand that you've got Glenn Youngkin holding. So that's when education takes off as one of the #1 issues. Youngkin realizes this is his opportunity in Northern Virginia. He goes to Northern Virginia. He speaks to Loudoun County. He speaks to Fairfax County. And that's where he convinces voters in those counties that he's going to serve their interests well in a way that McAuliffe won't, because McAuliffe had just declared that he thinks parents should stay out of the lives of their kids' education.
Right, and that's when Youngkin started talking about repealing the grocery tax and kitchen table issues and jobs and the like. So you think about this, and always in the media we love to make these grandiose statements of, this means X, that means, and there's this going theory that this means wokeism is dead and now suddenly there is a red wave to come. Too early?
I think what's critical here, the lesson that can be derived and should be derived no matter your political party, is listen to the voters and figure out what it is that they want. So Terry McAuliffe decides that he wants to nationalize this race. He wants to run it against Donald Trump, who's not even in the campaign. And Glenn Youngkin takes what's left of the battlefield, which is all of it. And that's just listening to voters and channeling their concerns. So much of the media has been spending a lot of time kind of focused on, like, what role did Trump play in this race? What role will Trump play in the future? And that's a perfectly good question because Trump has a big presence, of course, in the Republican Party. But I think the key is that question fundamentally misses that what made Trump successful in the first place is he spoke to the gut instincts and the feelings of policy among voters. So if candidates can duplicate that,
right,
not the Trump sort of insult spree,
but
sort of speaking to issues.
MAGA without the crazy is how it was described at one point, sort of in a thought. On the other hand, you had the left here watching Glenn Youngkin's rise. You pointed the moment that you knew he was going to win, and then all of a sudden sort of viewing it in this prism that didn't make a lot of sense to suburban voters. It almost sounds like Van Jones is more worried about Youngkin and the policies and the way Youngkin sells himself to a crowd than Donald Trump.
Well, first of all, I just think that analogy is like awful to talk about a political person that way, to suggest that there's somehow an infectious and deadly disease. Glenn Youngkin is anything but. Glenn Youngkin is like a pretty normal sort of middle-of-the-road guy, moderate temperament, and he spoke directly to voters' concerns. You had McAuliffe, who really wanted to make part of this campaign about the issue of abortion. Youngkin basically stayed away from that. He signaled that he was pro-life, but he said, you know what, the issues I'm going to focus on are the economy and schools and education.
Figured out what people really cared about.
That's straight up just what people cared about in Virginia, and that is how you succeed. This is not rocket science. In politics, you succeed if you can do the thing that the voters want you to do.
Yeah, well, and you have to see if everyone is learning that going forward. Vince, awesome conversation. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Good to see you. Last night's results are already changed, at least the view for a lot of people, of the 2022 map substantially. The Virginia Center for Politics, which correctly predicted Youngkin's victory, moved a number of races, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada Senate races, from leans Democrat to a toss-up. In a state much like Virginia, Colorado goes from safe Democrat to likely Democrat. Take a listen now to the House Minority Leader about what this means for flipping the House, possibly.
It'll be more than 70 Democrats that will be competitive. There's many that are going to lose their races based upon walking off a cliff from Nancy Pelosi pushing them. She may not care if she loses.
All right, Congressman Barry Moore of the state of Alabama joined us. Good to see you, Congressman. We appreciate it. Heard today Republicans say 90% chance we retake the House in 2022. I don't have to tell you, a year's a long time. Is there a little bit of overconfidence, you think, right now?
I don't think so, Leland. Honestly, 2 weeks is a lifetime in politics, but we already saw the trends. I mean, even in our class coming in, and I'm a freshman, we saw a red wave down the ballot south of Trump. And so I think that we've kind of been seeing the policies, whether it's the border crisis, inflation starting to hit the American people in the pocketbook and that sort of thing. And, honestly, we felt like we were going to get a win, and it looks like I think the momentum's moving in our direction.
Okay, the going idea on Capitol Hill among Democrats is, look, if we get these two pieces of Biden legislation passed, the big bipartisan spending bill, $1.5 trillion, and then the next big bill, $1.75 trillion, remake the social contract of America, then it's going to set us up for victory in the midterms in 2022. I know you're against those bills, but politically, is it almost better for you if they pass them?
You know, politically it would be better, but a whole lot worse for the nation and for the American people. And I think that's what we're seeing, like I said, at the gas pump and at the grocery store, where people are starting to pay so much more for the goods and services. As we print money, obviously inflation's an issue, and the American people see it.
All right. Alabama is MAGA country in a way that there's few states like it, really. And you think about Jeff Sessions, the former senator from Alabama who got behind Donald Trump in the very beginning, understood what was happening. And even today, you are seeing Democratic pundits and the media almost sort of still scornful of Virginia voters. She asked, what do Democrats do about that? I'll ask you, what do Republicans do about that?
Well, I just think we continue to stay on message, you know, and we've tried to bring attention to the border crisis, like I said. And you know, the American people, when you tell the parents that they don't control the children's future and destiny in education, I think that is a huge issue, and is an issue last night in Virginia. The American people, we still own our children. The federal government does not, and I think that's the message we have to send across the country. And they call us what they want to, but at the end of the day, it's encouraging to me as a freshman Republican to see the American people stand with us. We're in the minority party. We can't control the process. But at the end of the day, the American people standing with us can send a powerful message. And again, that was bipartisan, Leland. We had Republicans, I think, Democrats, and independents voted last night.
Yeah, there's no question. And we've talked about this, how unique it was. And it also happened in New Jersey, too. Even though the Republican didn't win, the 16-point swing is just unheard of in American politics in just a year. Brings us to an important point, though. Is it time for Republicans, maybe not in Alabama, where it's MAGA country, but in relatively moderate purple to blue states, to realize that in primaries, maybe MAGA without the crazy, maybe Trump light, maybe a Youngkin-like politician has a much better chance in the general election than someone who wraps themselves and kneels at the altar of Donald Trump?
Well, let me say this. The Trump policies, if you can speak with authenticity to the Trump policies and what he did for this country, whether it was energy independence, securing the southern border, those things, I think, resonate regardless of who you like at the top of the ticket. And I think it's a message on good policy.
So tailor the personality to the state, keep the policies the same. Congressman Barry Moore of Alabama, roll tide, my friend.
War Eagle.
Oh. Well, we'll have that conversation after the commercial break. Where do Democrats go from here? We're talking to them on Capitol Hill when we come back.
What congressional Dems hurt Terry McAuliffe? I mean, I'm going to be blunt. It's humbling to say it.
That's Virginia Senator, former VP candidate Tim Kaine spinning yesterday's loss. It mirrors the White House talking points. Yesterday's losses are because of anger over congressional inaction on President Biden's domestic agenda. Thus, Democratic leadership here on Capitol Hill says we must pass the president's massive spending plans immediately. NewsNation correspondent Kelly Meyer found some congressional Democrats willing to give another explanation. Joins us now. Got to admire Tim Kaine, at least for towing the party line. Fell on his sword pretty hard there. And then there's some other thoughts.
Yeah, he kept the focus on the bipartisan infrastructure package, getting the president's agenda passed, rather than talking about some of the other issues. For others I talked to on Capitol Hill, other Democrats, they said there was more to it than that. There was a poll that came out from NBC News from white, non-educated women saying that the ones that went for Biden in 2020 that he picked up switched over to Youngkin on Tuesday. The poll shows a 15-point swing to the GOP with this group. I asked Virginia Democrat Tim Kaine about this today.
We have to deliver results that voters anywhere can grab a hold of, but there were some issues in this very race that had Terry had these two bills to campaign on, I think it might have come out differently.
But you don't think it was anything besides BBB, BIF, other issues?
There's millions of other issues, but there's one that I can do something about.
We also talked to Democrat Jerry Connolly last night as the results came out, and he was really candid with us and open about what happened here. He says that Democrats really need to go back to their playbook and look at this strategy and find out what happened, what went wrong, how they can fix it, and how they could do this before next year, the 2022 midterms. Take a listen to what he had to say.
What do you think this says about next year? What do you think this means?
Again, I think we have to study this to know the answer to that. I think it's too early. It's a warning sign for sure.
Democrats divided not only over the race results, but what's happening here on Capitol Hill. The bill still stuck, both bipartisan infrastructure agenda as well as the Build Back Better plan, both still stalled here on Capitol Hill. Both Democrats divided over what to do next. The president saying today, get that to my desk. He told reporters that earlier.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Democrats are divided over what to do, how to do it, whose fault the losses are, and at the same time just hearing, oh, we got to pass something. Good luck on that. Kelly, great reporting as always. Thank you very much. See you on the Hill throughout the rest of the week. Progressives, even some moderate Democrats, as we talked about, jumped on the White House talking points that yesterday's loss stemmed from anger over Congressional inaction on President Biden's massive remake of the social contract. And still, they can't agree on what should be in the remake. Harvard professor Jason Furman, formerly of the Obama administration, tweeted, "My guess is the majority of Americans with a net worth of $50 to $300 million would get a tax cut under the Build Back Better plan with a full repeal of the SALT. That's the ability to deduct your state and local taxes from your federal income taxes. Somehow that's come back into the bill, more for the super rich than it does for climate change, child care, or preschool. That's obscene." Joining us now, Pablo Manriquez, Capitol correspondent for the Latino Rebels. Pablo, appreciate you staying up late. I know you've been up on Capitol Hill. There really going to be a vote this week?
I don't think so. I doubt it. It seems highly unlikely. I think that there's a lot of performance going on right now. For example, today after afternoon House votes, Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal and sort of very famous moderate Democrat Josh Gottheimer decided to leave the House chambers together, walk down the hall. I followed them. They entered a room together, with reporters looking. And I kind of looked in the room, and it was a dark room. I don't know that anything was actually going on in there. So it seemed like it was a little theater, yeah, but not a lot of substance. Not a lot of substance. There is a new bill text for Build Back Better. It's unclear if it's going to work in the Senate.
I'm so glad we have you tonight, because every time Nancy Pelosi and some on Capitol Hill say, oh, we're going to have a vote, we have Pablo on. Pablo goes, it ain't going to happen. And guess what? It never happens.
It doesn't, and that's one of the problems. I think that is probably the biggest problem right now that the Democratic caucus has, is that in the morning, Speaker Pelosi or sometimes even the White House is throwing this Hail Mary timeline pass down the field and hoping somebody catches it, but no one's even running for the pass. No one's even running routes at this point. So it's kind of I think that there's a lot of, like the election in Virginia, the current legislative state of affairs is a leadership failure in the Democratic Party. They're trying old tactics with new players, and it's not working.
It's interesting. One of the leadership of the Democratic Party was up on Capitol Hill. The vice president came down a couple of hours ago to have meetings. She talked to the press very, very briefly for a couple of seconds. But what was striking to me is how a couple of days ago she said very clearly about how the election in Virginia was going to define the next year. Take a listen.
What happens in Virginia will in large part determine what happens in 2022, 2024, and on.
Do you think she wishes she could have those back? Do Democrats wish she would have taken those back or not said them?
I think that she wishes she could take a lot of things back at this point. Kamala Harris is somebody who was chosen by, and I hate to say it, but the Obama machine as a perennial next president of the United States. And so far she's been uninspiring to everybody. But sound bites like that also put her in the same camp as a Pelosi calling for a vote today or this week or whatever. When you're saying that oh, we're going to win and it's going to define us, and then you lose, then she's basically saying, well, we've been defined as election losers. And given that she's likely to run in 3 years, that's a soundbite that'll probably come back to bite her, like a lot of her soundbites that she's given as vice president.
Pablo, it's always great talking to you, because you're definitely a cheerleader for one side, but you call balls and strikes in the way you see them. Let me ask you this. Is there a scenario in which you see votes, legitimate votes, on any of the president's agenda before Christmas?
Before Christmas, yes.
So at some point it's going to happen.
I do. I think at some point I think that in November or early December it's going to happen. The challenge that Democratic leadership is going to have in Congress is whether or not these timelines extend toward the debt limit fight that's coming in early December. So if they're fighting a big, whether they can keep the government funded and the stopgap and so on, whilst trying to pass these other big social agendas, it ain't happening. So it ain't happening.
I love the bluntness. Pablo, it's always good to see you. Keep up the great work, all right?
Thank you,
we always
Leland.
appreciate the conversation.
Great to be here.
All right, education, as we've talked about, played a huge role in Glenn Youngkin's win in Virginia. Schools are now enforcing vaccines mandates. Is that another part of the education debate that so many suburban moms came out to vote on? That when we come back. And tonight on Prime, another edition of Missing in America, where Marky Martin has the story of Kathy Ann James. Her car was found abandoned. The family hasn't stopped searching since. That's Prime, 9, 8 Central.
Vaccinating our children will help us keep our schools open, keep our kids in the classroom, learning, socializing with their classmates and teachers. This vaccine is safe and effective, so get your children vaccinated to protect themselves, to protect others, and to stop the spread.
Welcome back to Washington. That was President Biden today encouraging COVID vaccinations for children as young as 5 years old. 13 states plus D.C. have some sort of school vaccine mandate. Arizona, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, and Massachusetts, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and as we said, Washington, D.C. All right. As we last night proved, parents aren't necessarily okay with mandating things for their children. One of those parents, Sharon McKenman, organized a Let Them Breathe organization in California. She didn't like mask mandates. She doesn't like vaccine mandates much either. Sharon, appreciate you being with us. We understand it. Do you all have any standing as you're fighting these mandates? Is there anything you can do?
Well, we've already filed 2 lawsuits. So Let Them Breathe is going to have a hearing this Monday against the mask mandate. And then we've also filed a lawsuit against the second largest school district in the state that is saying that they're going to actually have an accelerated time schedule for the vaccine mandate, and that they are not going to honor the personal belief exemptions that California state law protects. So we're not only raising awareness and speaking out as parents, but we have taken legal action as well.
How much of this is about not trusting vaccines and not liking masks, and how much of it is not liking the government telling you what you have to do with your kids?
Well, it's definitely some of all of that. We know that the masking is ineffective, it's unnecessary, and it's harming our kids. As far as the vaccines, we know our kids are very resilient to the virus, and that there are no long-term studies on the safety of these vaccines. But definitely over all of that is just that aspect of choice. We're not anti-vax, we're not anti-mask, we're for choice. We shouldn't be co-parenting with the government. Obviously, the government has made a lot of missteps during this pandemic. They need to be listening to parents, and they need to be listening to students.
Sharon, as you saw what happened in Virginia, moms who were Biden voters switched to dark red Republican supporters of Glenn Youngkin. Are you seeing that same kind of shift over this issue? How much say should parents have in curriculum? Those who voted for Youngkin say 94%, a lot, some. It gives you the feeling that perhaps politicians in other states should take notice. Are you seeing the same thing?
Absolutely. Our group is very diverse. We have people from every background, every end of the political spectrum. And so I'm definitely hearing that. And the government needs to remember that they govern based on the consent of the governed. And so we have elected representatives. We are paying their salaries. They need to be listening to the parents. And during this pandemic, the parents are the ones who really heard how it was affecting our kids. It's not the politicians. They're not.
We certainly know from seeing things in Virginia how much of a difference parents made. Parents voted almost by 18 points for Glenn Youngkin. Interestingly enough, Youngkin used the exact same line you just used, consent of the governed, which is seeming to be coming back into vogue these days, which is probably a good thing. Sharon, great conversation. Let us know how the lawsuit goes. Thank you.
Will do.
Big story last week about $450,000 of your taxpayer money to every illegal family that came across and had their kids separated. President Biden firing back, but now the ACLU said the president may not be right. So will illegal immigrants get $500,000 or not when we come back?
Do you think that might incentivize more people to come over illegally?
If you guys keep sending that garbage out, yeah, but it's not true.
So this is a garbage report.
Yeah.
Okay, so
$450,000 per person. Is that what you're saying?
that was separated from a family member at the border under the last administration.
That's not going to happen.
Wall Street Journal report that illegal immigrants and children separated at the border could receive as much as $450,000 to settle lawsuits. But now the ACLU is saying President Biden, quote, may not have been fully briefed about the actions of his very own Justice Department, and he risks abandoning a core campaign promise to do justice for the thousands of separated families. With that, we bring in the man you just saw, Phil Wegman, who covers the White House for Real Clear Politics. Well, what is it? Is there $450,000 floating around there for illegal immigrants or not?
We're going to find out. And the interesting thing that you teased up there is that the ACLU comes out immediately afterwards, and they say that the president may have not been briefed. Right after the president says that the reporting from the Wall Street Journal is garbage. We know that this administration has said that they're going to let the Department of Justice be independent. So is this a issue where the president just doesn't know what's in the works behind the scenes? Or has he put the kibosh on this once and for all?
Well, could two things have been true at once? Could it be true that the Justice Department was in those conversations, and then after the news broke in the Wall Street Journal, the president put the kibosh on it?
Yeah, that could be the case, and this is the kind of tricky situation that the administration has been trying to avoid for some time. They pride themselves on saying that their administrative agencies are independent, that they don't meddle, but clearly Biden was reading the room there. He realizes that this is something that is not going to be popular among Republicans, among conservatives, yes, but also among a lot of people who are still trying to get back to normal everyday life as we return from the pandemic.
Yeah, it seemed as though that when that Wall Street Journal article dropped, it was a week ago Thursday, and no one really understood. It was this sort of odd headline, $450,000 for every illegal immigrant and who was separated from a child. Sometimes it wasn't even their kids at the border during the Trump administration. And the blowback was just wild.
The blowback was wild, and the headline itself was something that you had to question. But this is the Wall Street Journal. They're not going to go with a story like that unless their reporting is airtight. I think what this shows, though, is that, yeah, the child separation policy, that was clearly unpopular. But this seems like it would be an overcorrection. And the Biden administration, they're going to have to come up with something, because clearly the ACLU feels like they've reached sort of an agreement.
Yeah, and you have to wonder whether that was a little bit of a shot across the bow by the ACLU of, hey, either live up to this or we're going to have documents or notes or something that's going to really embarrass the administration and embarrass the president, who says that's garbage. And the ACLU says, oh, yeah, well, here's emails from the Justice Department. Brings up this larger split, perhaps, that the Biden administration ran on all of these very, very anti-MAGA border policies and is now realizing they are way underwater by 70 or so points on the border issue.
Yeah, and this is not something that they can ignore anymore, especially after what we saw in Virginia and how things were so close in New Jersey. I think the administration is looking at their polling. They realize that the midterms are going to be difficult. But again, why didn't they confirm or deny this report for 6 days? I think that we're going to see a drip, drip, drip of documents like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I want to get you real quick. President Biden comes out and says, hey, look, the only reason we lost Virginia is because the Capitol Hill Democrats haven't passed my agenda. Does the White House really believe that, or behind the scenes are they trying to figure this out and see how they can't bring those suburban women back into the fold?
They're going to need a lot more than just an argument about a legislative agenda to get those suburban women back. But I think that what we're seeing is more of the same from the president. He's been saying for some time that he wants his agenda to get passed. The ironic thing now is that both moderates and progressives seem to be on the same page. Joe Manchin today said...
they're on the same page to
delay it.
Yeah, to delay it. All right, we're going to see you soon with more reporting from Real Clear Politics. We'll see you back in Chicago tomorrow night. Dan Abrams Live is next. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.